Imagine you are entering a building. Sometimes you just show a key, sometimes you got a wristband, sometimes you show an ID, and sometimes one card opens everything. That's exactly how API authentication works. But when you look at the technical side, API key, JWT, OAuth, OIDC, bearer token, session, SSO, RBAC, ABAC, it seems like learning 10 different systems just to secure one API. Sounds complicated, right? In this video, I'll break down all the major modern authentication concepts using simple real-life analogy so that even if you're a beginner, you will understand them easily. Let's start. The first method is API key, the simplest and the weakest. You can think it like a building's gate code. You live in an apartment complex, the front gate has 4-digit code. Everyone in the building shared the same code. One day, a delivery guy saw you type it, and now he knows the key as well. There is no camera, no log. The gate does not know if it's you or the pizza guy or your neighbor. That's an API key. One shared secret, no identity, no expiry. How it works technically? You as a developer go to the API provider website and then generate API key. They give you a string. Now every time your app calls the API, you include that key in the request header. The server check, do I recognize the key? If yes, it returns 200 OK with data. If no, it returns 401 unauthorized. That's it. No logging page, no user identity, no fancy handshake. Just send your code, you get your data. But the problem with this approach is huge because no user identity, as server knows the key but don't know who is actually using it. Was it you or the hacker who found the key? Then there is no expiry. The key works forever until someone manually deletes it from the database. Also, the key gives full access. You can't say this key is only for read, not for write. And if leaked, anyone who has the string have full access. Game over. You can still use it for server-to-server communication like internal microservice calling each other or simple public API like weather, exchange rate, and never use it for user-facing apps where you need to know who the user is. Now, OAuth 2.0, the modern authentication mechanism. Let's say you are visiting a city. You want to enter the Spotify hotel's rooftop bar, but you don't have a Spotify account. The Spotify hotels say, we trust Google Hotel across the street. If they vouch for you, you are in. Now, you check in at Google's hotel with your Google ID and password. Then Google gives you a sealed envelope which containing one-time pickup code. Then you walk back to Spotify and hand them the envelope. Spotify manager opens the envelope and calls Google back office to verify. Then Google sends Spotify your name and email only. Spotify now know your name and email, but they never saw your Google's password. How it works technically? Imagine you are signing up for Spotify. You visit spotify.com and click login with Google. Spotify does not ask for a password. Instead, it redirects your browser to Google's login page. Now your browser is on Google's page. You type your Google password directly on google.com. Spotify never see this password. Google asks, Spotify want to access your email and profile. Do you like to allow? You click allow, then Google redirect your browser back to Spotify's callback URL where it contains a code, and this code is like a one-time pickup ticket. It's useless on its own because you also need client secret to exchange it. Now there is a critical part. When the browser hit spotify.com/callback with the order, the request lands on Spotify server, so Spotify backend now have the code. Then Spotify backend call Google directly, no browser involved, just a server-to-server communication with the code plus secret that only Spotify know. Google verify everything and send back 3 tokens: access, refresh, and ID token. Where access token is a password to call Google API on your behalf. Normally, it expires in 1 hour. Refresh token, a way to call new access token when the old token expires without making the user logging again. And ID token, a JWT that say who the user is. I will explain it later. Finally, Spotify used the token to call Google API, then Google replies with name, email, profile picture. Now, Spotify know your username and email address. In the entire flow, you never shared your Google password with Spotify. Now, JWT. What inside the token? It's like after going through the hotel check-in, you got a laminated badge. And that badge say your name, role, issued by, expiry, and hologram seal. Every bar, restaurant, and lounge in the hotel can look at at your badge and instantly know who you are and what you are allowed to do. But the trade-off is, if the hotel ban you at 3 p.m., your badge still say VIP guest until midnight. How it works technically? A JWT, which is called JSON Web Token, is just a long string which has 3 parts separated by dots. Part 1 is the header. It say which algorithm was used to sign it. Part 2 is the payload, the actual useful data, also called claims, that is what the server read. It contains things like who is this, what they can do, when does this expire, and who issued the token. Part 3 is the signature, a cryptographic seal. The auth server creates it using a private key. Anyone with the private key can verify who issued the token and nobody can change it. Now, when your request arrived with JWT, the server does 5 things, all without touching a database. It split the token into 3 parts, decode the payload, verifies the signature using the public key, checks token expiry, and if it trusts the issuer. If all check pass, it return your data. If fail, you get 401 unauthorized error code. Why is no database call is a big deal? With session-based auth, the server store session data in a database. Every single request means a database lookup. 10,000 requests per second means 10,000 times database query. It's a slow and expensive operation. With JWT, all the info is inside the token itself. No DB, no Redis, no shared state. Any server in your cluster can verify it independently. But the trade-off is you cannot revoke a JWT once issued. The solution is to keep the access token short-lived, like 15 minutes. Use refresh token to get new ones. For emergencies, maintain a small block list in Redis. Now, OIDC. Why it matters? OAuth has a gap. OAuth 2.0 give you a hotel key card, so you can enter room 305. Think of it like a hotel with a pool. When you enter, you get a wristband. It lets you access places, but no one know who you are. It only proves you have a permission, not your identity. Now imagine you got a photo ID badge. It has your name, face, email, so staff can say, oh, this is Tanvir. How it works technically? After OAuth 2.0, you log in and you get an access token. You know the app is allowed to access the user's email scope, but you don't know the user's name, anything about their identity. The access token is just like a permission slip. It say what you can do, but not who you are. OIDC fix it. It's a thin layer on top of OAuth 2.0, same flow, same redirect, same code exchange. But the token response now include an extra token that is called ID token. So without OIDC, you get access token and refresh token. But with OIDC, you get access, refresh, and ID token. The ID token is a JWT that contains standardized user info like name, email, and picture, which means those field names are now same whether you are using Google, Microsoft, Keycloak, or Auth0. Your app does not need different code for each provider. Important rule, don't mix them up. The ID token is for your app to know who the user is. Never send it to other API. The access token is for calling API. Never use it to identify the user. Think of it like ID token as your driver's license. It proves who you are, and the access token is like your credit card that let you buy things. Authentication answer who you are, but authorization answer what you can do. There are two main approaches, RBAC and ABAC. RBAC is role-based access control. It's like a color wristband at a festival. You don't check each person's name, you just check their wristband color. You define a set of rules, each with a specific permission. For example, admin can read, write, delete, and manage user, where editor can read and write, and viewer can only read. The user's role is stored in JWT and your code checks it. RBAC is simple to understand, easy to use, and cover almost 90% case. But ABAC is more complex. Instead of checking your wristband color, you also check your department badge, the time of day, and which room you are trying to enter. For example, a doctor can view patient's record only in their own department during working hour. Use ABAC when simple roles are not enough, because access depends on context, who, what, where, and when. Regardless of which approach you use, always apply least privilege, like give minimum permission needed, default, deny everything. Scope validation, if OAuth scope say read, do not allow delete. Then object ownership. ownership. Always check, does this user own this resource? And defense in depth, gateway check, service check, DB level constraint. So in short, API gateway answers, if this token valid, is it expired? It's a front door bouncer. Your service answer, can this user do this action? It's like a room level security. Both are needed. Now the bearer token, which is just a delivery mechanism. Bearer is not an auth method. It's how you deliver the token, like saying I'm sending it via FedEx. FedEx is a transporter, not the package. The token inside can be JWT or a OAuth access token. So bearer is like an envelope. What's inside the envelope determine how the server processes it. The risk, if someone stolen the token, they can use it just like a stolen concert ticket. That's why you always have to use HTTPS and short expiry token. Now SSO, single sign-on, one login, many apps. You can imagine like visiting a theme park with 10 different zones. Without SSO, every zone has its own ticket booth. You have to buy ticket for Water World, enjoy the slide. Then walk to Space Zone and you have to buy another ticket and another one for Adventureland. But with SSO, you go to the main entrance and show your ID and get a wristband. Now you walk to any zone, the scanner at each entrance read your wristband and let you through. But still the risk is, if someone clone your wristband, they will get into all 10 zones. That's why the main entrance also check your fingerprint, technically MFA. How it works technically. Imagine you work at a company with 10 different internal apps, email, calendar, HR portal, wiki, Jira. Without SSO, you need 10 different login. For new employee, create 10 new account. Someone leaves, deactivate all 10 accounts. It's a mess. With SSO, one login, all app, one place to manage all the users and access. The flow is, let's say when you visit email app, you are not logged in, email app does not handle logging itself. It redirects you to the identity provider. Then you log in at identity provider, type your password once on the identity provider page. The identity provider verifies you, create a SSO session and sends token back to the email app. Now you are logged in. Later, you visit calendar app, you are not logged in here either. Calendar app also redirects you to the same identity provider. Here is the magic. The identity provider check, do I have a SSO session for this browser? If yes, the cookie from the email app login still exists. So the identity provider immediately send token to the calendar app without asking for your password again, and you are logged in instantly. That's why it called single sign-on. You sign in only once at the identity provider site and all the app that trust the identity provider recognize you automatically. But please remember, SSO is a concept, it's not a protocol. It describes the behavior. It can be built with OIDC or other protocol. But the big risk is, if the identity provider is compromised, all apps are compromised. If someone steals your identity provider credential, they get into everything. That's why it's always safe to enable MFA, which is called multi-factor authentication. Now, session authentication, cookie based, the old way. You logged in, your browser send your username and password to the server. If credentials are valid, the server creates an entry in its session store like Redis, database or memory with a session ID. Then the server send back a cookie in the response. Your browser save this cookie automatically. Now every future request includes this cookie automatically. When you visit any page on the same site, your browser attach the cookie to the request. You don't have to do anything. The browser does all for you. The server takes that info and look it up in the session store, find your user info and respond. You can still use this method when you serve a single domain, but the trade-off is sessions are easy to revoke but hard to scale. Now here is the complete picture. Here how all pieces connect into a real system. First, user logged in via OIDC and get back the access token, ID token and refresh token. Client app send request with the JWT in every app call. API gateway validate the JWT, check signature, expiry, rate limit and reject bad request before they reach to your service. Your service does authorization check, RBAC, ABAC, ownership, scope. If everything pass, 200 OK with user data. Otherwise, send 401 unauthorized.